At my sister's Harvard graduation, my father stood at the podium and disowned me in front of 300 people. No warning, no private conversation, just a smile for her and silence for me. They left my name off the invitations, off the program, off the family. But what they didn't know was that I had already begun to suspect, and what I would uncover in the weeks that followed: stolen inheritance, forged signatures, a house sold behind my back, would tear apart everything they had built. They thought they were erasing me. They were wrong. My name is Eleanor Prescott, and this is how I exposed the family that threw me away. But before I tell you about the documents I found, the recordings I gathered, and the courtroom where everything finally came to light, I need to take you back to the beginning, to the day I received an invitation that didn't include my name, to the moment I decided to show up anyway, because that's where everything started to unravel. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Heavy cream cardstock, gold foil lettering, the kind of stationery that whispered old money and older expectations. I recognized my mother's taste immediately. She had always believed that presentation was everything, that the right paper stock could make even bad news feel like a privilege. I stood in the narrow hallway of my Somerville apartment, rain dripping from my umbrella onto the worn hardwood floor, and turned the envelope over in my hands. The return address was embossed, the Prescott family. Not Mom and Dad, not even Victoria and Theodore. Just the family name, like a corporation sending quarterly reports. Inside, the invitation was exactly what I expected: Vivian's Harvard graduation ceremony, the date, the time, the dress code, a small card for RSVP with a stamped return envelope. What I didn't expect was the family listing at the bottom. Celebrating with Vivian, Theodore Prescott III, Victoria Hayes Prescott, and honored guests. I read it 3 times, certain I had missed something. My name should have been there. Eleanor Prescott, the younger daughter, the other one. But there was only white space where I should have been. I walked to my kitchen, 3 steps from the hallway in an apartment this small, and set the invitation on the counter next to a stack of unpaid bills and a half-empty coffee mug from this morning. The rain picked up outside, drumming against the window like impatient fingers. The last time I had spoken to my mother was 3 months ago. We had met for lunch at her request, at a restaurant I couldn't afford, and she didn't notice. She spent most of the meal on her phone, coordinating something for the foundation. When she finally looked up, she said, "Maybe it's best if you focus on your own path for a while, Eleanor. Give us all some breathing room." I had nodded and paid for my salad with a credit card I was still paying off. Breathing room, that's what she called it. I picked up the invitation again and studied the calligraphy. My mother had probably hired someone for this. She always did. But I remembered a time 20 years ago when we had sat together at the dining room table designing the family crest that now adorned every piece of Prescott stationery. I was 7 years old and she had let me choose the font for the family motto. "You have a good eye, Ellie," she had said. "Maybe you'll be the creative one." The creative one. The other one, the one whose name didn't make it onto the invitation. I should have thrown it away. That would have been the logical choice, the self-respecting choice. What kind of person shows up to an event where they've been deliberately excluded? But logic had never been my strong suit when it came to my family. Hope was. Stupid, stubborn, inexplicable hope that maybe this time would be different. Maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe the printer had run out of space. Maybe I still mattered to them. I walked to my closet, a converted coat closet barely big enough to stand in, and pushed aside the thrift store dresses and work blazers until I found it. Navy blue, slightly faded at the cuffs, a small tear in the lining I had never fixed. The blazer I had worn to my own college graduation, the day no one from my family came. I pulled it from the hanger and held it up to the light. "Well," I said to the empty apartment, "let's see what they're really planning." I arrived at Harvard Yard 2 hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The June sun was already fierce, burning off the morning mist and turning the brick walkways into radiators. Students in caps and gowns clustered near the gates, taking photos, laughing, hugging parents who had driven from Connecticut or flown in from California. Everyone seemed to glow with accomplishment and belonging. I stood near the entrance to the yard and watched a father lift his daughter off her feet in a bear hug, her graduation cap tumbling to the ground. Her mother picked it up, brushing off the dust, laughing. A family. A unit. Something I had stopped believing in years ago. I spotted them before they spotted me. My mother wore a pale blue suit, Chanel probably, or something equally expensive, with her signature string of pearls and the gold lapel pin bearing the family crest. Her blonde hair was swept back in a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place. She looked like she was posing for a magazine cover even while standing in the middle of a crowd. My father stood beside her, his blazer folded over one arm, phone in hand, foot tapping impatiently against the grass. Theodore Prescott III had the kind of distinguished gray temples that made middle-aged men look presidential, but up close, you could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept darting toward my mother for approval. And between them, radiant in her graduation robes and honor cords, stood Vivian. My sister was 5 years older than me, but she had always seemed like she belonged to a different generation entirely, the generation that did everything right. Valedictorian, Ivy League, now Harvard MBA. She had taken a gap year to find herself in Europe, which really meant she had spent 12 months networking with the right people at the right parties. Her robe was draped perfectly over her shoulders. Her cords were layered just so. Even her smile seemed professionally calibrated. I walked toward them slowly, giving myself time to prepare. The grass was soft under my flats. I had worn sensible shoes, knowing I might need to make a quick exit. That was something I had learned growing up in this family. Always have an escape route. My mother saw me first. Her expression shifted for just a fraction of a second. Surprise, then something colder. Calculation, annoyance. It was gone almost before I registered it, replaced by the polished mask she wore for public consumption. "Eleanor," she said, her voice carrying just enough warmth to satisfy anyone watching. "You came." "I got the invitation," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Did you?" She gave a small laugh, the kind that wasn't really a laugh at all. "I wasn't sure the RSVP list made it that far." My father didn't speak. He checked his watch, then went back to his phone. Vivian stepped forward and opened her arms for a hug. I leaned in out of habit, the way you do with family, even when the gesture feels hollow. "You look amazing," I told her, because it was true. "Thanks." Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I'm glad you're here." But even as she said it, her eyes were sliding sideways toward our mother, calculating how much warmth she was allowed to show. Vivian had always been like that, generous in private, careful in public. She had learned early that our mother kept score, and affection toward me was a deduction. I pulled away from the hug and looked around for the seating chart. Every formal family event had one. My mother insisted on controlling who sat where, who spoke to whom, who was seen with whom. I found it posted on a wooden easel near the entrance arch, a cream-colored card with elegant script. The Prescott family, Theodore, Victoria, Vivian plus 2 guests. I searched for my name. It wasn't there. "Excuse me? Are you with the Prescott party?" I turned to find a young woman in a volunteer shirt holding a clipboard. She smiled the efficient smile of someone managing logistics. "I'm Eleanor Prescott," I said. She scanned her list, then scanned it again. "I'm sorry, I don't see—" "Oh, here we go. You're listed as a general guest." She handed me a badge from a different pile. White plastic, no ribbon, no family crest, just the word guest in Times New Roman. I stared at the badge for a long moment. 20 years ago, I had helped my mother design the crest that appeared on every piece of family correspondence, every foundation letterhead, every invitation to every event that mattered. We had spent a week on the typography alone. She had praised my eye for detail, my sense of balance. Now I held a badge that could have belonged to anyone, a caterer, a photographer, a stranger off the street. "Is there a problem?" the volunteer asked. "No," I said. "No problem." I clipped the badge to my blazer, the same blazer I had worn to my own graduation, the day they hadn't bothered to attend, and walked toward the seating tent. The interior was cool and dim after the harsh sunlight. rows of white folding chairs arranged in precise formation. An usher directed me toward the back left section, far from the reserved family seating near the front. I found a spot between an elderly man who was already asleep and a toddler scribbling on her program with a crayon. The child's mother gave me an apologetic smile. "She's a handful," the woman said. "Aren't we all?" I replied. I sat down and looked at my badge again. Guest. No name, no title, no indication that I had any connection to the family being celebrated today. In my head, I could hear my own voice, tired and bitter. Not even a name tag, just a ghost badge. That's what I am to them now. The ceremony wouldn't start for another hour. I could leave. I could walk out of this tent, out of Harvard Yard, out of their lives entirely. That would be the dignified choice, the choice that preserved what was left of my self-respect. But I stayed. Not because I expected anything to change. Not because I thought they might suddenly remember they had 2 daughters instead of 1. I stayed because I needed to see it. Whatever they were planning, whatever this careful, deliberate exclusion was building toward, I needed to witness it with my own eyes. A ghost showing up to her own funeral. The ceremony began at exactly 11:03, a procession of faculty and academic regalia, the university president offering measured words about achievement and responsibility. A student speaker whose name I immediately forgot, talking about new beginnings and limitless futures. I sat in my corner and watched from a distance, the way I had always watched my family, close enough to see, far enough to be invisible. When Vivian walked across the stage to receive her diploma, the applause was thunderous. My mother stood and clapped with both hands raised, her smile wide and genuine for once. My father actually put down his phone. I clapped too, though no one was watching me. Then came the family tributes. This was a Harvard tradition at certain ceremonies, a chance for families to offer a few words of appreciation for their graduates. Most were brief. A father tearing up as he talked about his daughter's perseverance. A grandmother speaking in halting English about the sacrifices that had made this day possible. When my father's name was announced, I felt my stomach clench. Theodore Prescott III walked to the podium with the easy confidence of a man who had given 1,000 speeches at 1,000 fundraisers. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and smiled out at the audience like a senator about to pitch a bill. "Today," he began, "we celebrate the brilliance and dedication of our eldest daughter, Vivian. Her journey has been nothing short of extraordinary." Polite applause. Cameras clicked. Vivian looked down modestly, practicing the humility she had perfected for public consumption. But my father wasn't finished. "This day also marks a turning point for our family," he continued, and something in his tone made me sit up straighter. "A necessary shift in energy, values, and focus." The words hung in the air, strange and weighted. "We've made a difficult decision." He paused, and for a moment his eyes seemed to scan the crowd. "From this day forward, we will no longer be extending ourselves to those who do not align with the integrity and vision we hold. No. That includes our daughter, Eleanor." Silence. No gasp from the crowd. No protest. Just a ripple of awkward coughs and rustling fabric. The sound of people who had witnessed something uncomfortable and were pretending they hadn't. I didn't stand. I didn't cry. I sat there with my hands pressed flat against my knees, suddenly aware of every nerve ending in my body, every heartbeat, every shallow breath. My ears buzzed. The edges of my vision went slightly gray. On stage, my mother was smiling. Not the polished smile she wore for strangers, but something genuine, satisfied even, like she had just completed a successful business transaction. Vivian didn't say a word. She didn't look in my direction. She just stared at her hands folded in her lap, complicit in silence. Someone in the row behind me whispered, "Did he just—" Another voice, "Who does that at a graduation?" The speech continued. Something about investments, future, roots, and weeds. I couldn't track the words anymore. They blurred together into white noise, meaningless sounds washing over me while I sat perfectly still, jaw clenched, refusing to break. This was it then. This was what they had planned. Not a private conversation, not a letter, Not even a phone call. A public execution dressed up in ceremony and applause. I waited until the speech ended. I waited through the scattered applause, through the next speaker, through the announcement of some award I didn't hear. I waited because I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me run. Then, slowly, I stood. The elderly man beside me was still asleep. The toddler had moved on from crayons to pulling at her mother's earrings. No one was watching me. No one had been watching me all day. I walked toward the exit, keeping my pace steady, my shoulders straight. The sunlight hit me like a physical force as I stepped outside, bright and hot and indifferent. I stopped just beyond the tent entrance and turned to look back. Through the gap in the canvas, I could see my family. My mother had risen from her seat and was embracing someone, a donor probably, or a board member. My father was shaking hands with a man in a three-piece suit. Vivian was accepting a bouquet of roses, her smile radiant and practiced. They weren't looking for me. They weren't wondering where I had gone. To them, I had already disappeared. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the graduation program I had been clutching since the ceremony began. Inside was a glossy photo of the Prescott family, Theodore, Victoria, and Vivian, posed in front of the foundation's headquarters, smiling like a campaign advertisement. "Proud moment for the Prescott family," the caption read. No mention of the other daughter, the one who didn't photograph well with their narrative. I folded the program carefully and slipped it back into my pocket. Then I turned and walked away. I should have kept walking. Should have found the nearest T station, ridden back to Somerville, and started the long process of cutting them out of my life for good. That would have been the healthy choice, the choice a therapist would have recommended. Instead, I found myself drifting toward the reception tent. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see how far they would take it. Maybe some part of me still hoped that the speech had been a mistake, a moment of public theater that would be privately apologized for. Maybe I just wasn't ready to let go. The reception was already in full swing when I arrived. Waiters circulated with champagne flutes and canapes. Donors mingled with faculty. My mother held court near the entrance, accepting congratulations as if she were the one who had graduated. I walked to the family table and scanned the name cards arranged around a crystal centerpiece. Vivian's name was there. My father's. My mother's. Aunt Miriam. Someone named Bradley, who I assumed was a foundation board member. My name was not there. A woman approached the table, someone I vaguely recognized from middle school, grown up now with expensive highlights and a designer dress. "Oh, hey," she said, her eyes widening slightly. "I thought you weren't coming. Your mom told everyone it was a closed family celebration." She paused, searching for the right words. She said something about keeping the focus clear. She smiled awkwardly, like maybe that wasn't as cruel as it sounded. I smiled back. You know how my mother loves focus. I picked up a card from the table, cream-colored, gold-bordered, handwritten in elegant script. "Congratulations to our only daughter, Vivian. With all our love, Mom and Dad, only daughter." Something inside me shifted, not snapped, not broke, just tilted, like a picture frame knocked slightly askew. A small adjustment that changed everything. A woman in a floral dress passed by, glanced at me and said, "You must be with the catering team. You're not wearing the family pin." I looked down at my badge. Guest. No name, no title, no proof that I belonged here at all. "You're right," I said. "I'm not." I picked up a glass of Prosecco from a passing waiter's tray, slipped the gold-bordered card into my purse, and walked toward the back exit of the tent without another word. Ghosts don't knock things over. They just remove things without being noticed. The sun was setting by the time I got back to Somerville. I climbed the 3 flights to my apartment slowly, each step heavier than the last. The building was old, radiators that clanged in winter, windows that stuck in summer, a landlord who answered emails maybe twice a month. But it was mine. The only space in the world that was entirely mine. I unlocked the door and stood in the entrance for a long moment, not bothering to turn on the lights. The silence wrapped around me like a familiar blanket, worn and comfortable and sad. My apartment was small, kitchen, living room, bedroom, and a bathroom I could barely turn around in, but I had made it cozy. Second-hand furniture I had refinished myself. plants on the windowsill that I talked to when I was lonely, a bookshelf crammed with novels I returned to like old friends. This was my world. Everything outside it was hostile territory. I kicked off my shoes and dropped my purse on the kitchen counter. The graduation program slid out, its pages fanning open to reveal the family photo again. Proud moment for the Prescott family. I should have thrown it away. But instead, I found myself digging through my closet, pulling out boxes I hadn't opened in years. Yearbooks, photo albums, the detritus of a childhood spent trying to belong. I found what I was looking for in a box labeled MISC, Vivian's high school graduation yearbook from 10 years ago. I flipped to the back where families could purchase tribute pages for their graduates. The Prescott tribute was a full page, glossy, professionally designed, featuring a large photo of the family standing on our front porch. I remembered that photo. I remembered standing right there, right next to Vivian, wearing a dress my mother had picked out. I remembered her yelling at me for having a wrinkle across the waist. But in this yearbook, in this tribute page, I wasn't there. I had been cropped out, cleanly, precisely, deliberately. To the daughter who never gave up, the caption read, "We are so proud of you, Vivian." I touched the edge of the page, tracing the space where I should have been. They didn't forget me. They erased me. I stared at that photo until my eyes blurred, until the faces swam and the colors bled together. Then I set the yearbook aside, pulled my laptop from my bag, and opened it on the kitchen table. It was time to start digging. Rain started just after midnight. It tapped against the kitchen window like someone too polite to knock. Soft at first, then more insistent, as if it had something important to say. I sat with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, laptop glowing in the darkness, coffee growing cold beside me. I hadn't moved in hours. I had decided to stop crying, and so I didn't. I started digging instead. The shared cloud drive was still there, a digital folder I had set up years ago when I did part-time accounting for the foundation. My parents had never revoked my access. Typical of them, really. They liked to erase people with words, not technology. I clicked through the folders, not sure what I was looking for. Old tax returns, donation receipts, board meeting minutes from years I barely remembered. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained why they had chosen today to cast me out. Then I found the folder labeled Holdings, updated. Inside was a single PDF, Transfer Authorization, Seaside Property, Final. I clicked on it. The document was dense with legal language, heretofore and pursuant to and other phrases designed to make simple things complicated. But the essential facts were clear enough. The seaside property in Cape Elizabeth, the beach house my grandmother had left to the family trust, had been transferred out of the trust entirely. New owner, Ashford Holdings, LLC. And there, at the bottom of the document, was a signature. Eleanor Prescott. My name. My signature. Except it wasn't. I pulled up a lease agreement from my files, something I had signed 2 years ago for this apartment, and compared the signatures side by side. They weren't even close. The S was too flat. The loop on the L was too wide. The overall slant was wrong. It was a forgery, and not even a particularly good one, but it had been notarized, stamped and sealed by someone named Tabitha Prescott. My cousin, my mother's favorite cousin's daughter, a notary public who had clearly not bothered to verify that the person signing was actually the person named on the document. I closed the laptop slowly, like sealing a coffin. They hadn't just disowned me. They had stolen from me, forged my signature, transferred my inheritance to some shell company without my knowledge or consent. This wasn't family drama. This was criminal. I sat in the darkness, listening to the rain, feeling something cold and hard take root in my chest. They thought they could erase me, make me disappear, turn me into nothing more than an awkward memory, a name left off the guest list, a face cropped out of photos. They were wrong. I called Aunt Mavis at 3 a.m. She was the only person in my family who had ever treated me like I mattered, my father's younger sister, widowed 5 years ago, living alone in a townhouse in Providence. She had always been kind to me in quiet ways. Birthday cards with handwritten notes, phone calls on holidays, the occasional lunch when she was in Boston. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice raspy with sleep. "Eleanor? Honey, is everything okay?" "Not really." My voice cracked on the words, and I hated myself for it. "I found a property transfer, with my name on it, but it's not my signature, Aunt Mavis." A long pause. The sound of her sitting up in bed, adjusting the phone. "Oh, Eleanor," she whispered. "You saw it, didn't you?" I asked. "You knew." Another pause, longer this time. "Your mother told me it was just paperwork," Mavis said finally. "That they were cleaning up the books for tax season. I thought maybe it was a mistake, or something they'd tell you about later." "They didn't tell me anything. They forged my signature and sold the beach house to some LLC. I didn't even know until tonight." "I should have said something." Mavis's voice wavered, old guilt surfacing. "I knew it didn't feel right. But you know how your mother gets, and your father, he just follows." "You know how your mother gets. Like she was a force of nature, a hurricane you couldn't stop, only brace for." "I'm tired of making excuses for them, Aunt Mavis." "I know, baby." Her voice cracked. "I know." We sat in silence for a long moment, listening to each other breathe, listening to the rain. "There might be more," Mavis said finally. "Things from before your grandmother passed. Eleanor, be careful. Victoria doesn't lose gracefully. If she finds out you're looking into this..." "Let her find out." "Eleanor, I mean it. I'm done being careful. I'm done being the daughter who doesn't make waves." More silence. Then Mavis sighed, and I heard something shift in her voice. Resignation, maybe. Or respect. "Your grandmother was the same way," she said. "Stubborn as a stone. She loved you, Eleanor. Whatever your mother says, whatever she's done, Elise loved you best of all." I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe it. "I have to go," I said. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "Be careful," Mavis repeated, "and call me if you need anything at all." I hung up and sat staring at my phone for a long moment. Then I looked at my laptop, still closed on the table. A notification had appeared on the screen. "Your access to Prescott Foundation's shared files will be reviewed in 48 hours. 48 hours? That was how long I had before they shut the door. I opened the laptop and started downloading everything I could find. I worked through the night. The rain stopped around 4, replaced by a gray pre-dawn light that seeped through the kitchen window like something half alive. I didn't notice. I was too focused on the progress bar crawling across my screen, too busy sorting files into folders, too desperate to grab everything I could before the 48-hour window slammed shut. The shared drive was a mess. Years of documents dumped without organization, folders nested inside more folders. My mother's approach to digital filing was the same as her approach to family problems. Hide it somewhere no one will look and hope it goes away. But I had time. Not much, but enough. By sunrise, I had downloaded the property transfer with my forged signature, 3 years of board meeting minutes, dozens of email chains between my parents and their lawyer, financial statements going back a decade, what I couldn't get, the original trust documents, encrypted, password protected, the full audit trail from the last 5 years, missing entirely, anything related to my grandmother's will. Those gaps worried me. They suggested that someone had already cleaned house, already removed the most incriminating evidence. But what I had was a start, a foundation to build on. I made coffee and stared out the window as the sun rose over Somerville. My eyes burned, my back ached from hunching over the laptop for hours. But I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. At 9 o'clock, I showered, dressed, and went to work like nothing had happened. The nonprofit where I handled donor relations was housed in a converted brownstone near Central Square. It was the kind of job that paid just enough to cover rent and not quite enough to cover student loans. The kind of job my mother called a nice hobby while you figure out what you really want to do. What I really wanted to do was survive. That was about as far as I could plan these days. I was pouring my second cup of coffee in the break room when Rachel walked in, a junior analyst with an enthusiasm that I found exhausting and enviable in equal measure. "Hey," she said, "I saw some pics on social media last night. Your sister's graduation looked amazing. That dress she wore? Stunning. I kept my face neutral. She always looks the part. Were you there? I didn't see you in any of the photos. I was there. I took a sip of coffee. Just in the shadows, like always. Rachel laughed, not catching the edge in my voice. You're so mysterious, Eleanor. I never know what's going on with you. Mysterious. That was one word for it. I walked back to my desk and stared at my computer screen without seeing it. Around me, the office hummed with ordinary activity. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people complaining about the coffee machine. Normal life. The kind of life I was supposed to be living. But underneath that normality, something had changed. I could feel it in my bones, in the cold, hard thing that had taken root in my chest last night. My family thought they could erase me, thought they could forge my signature, steal my inheritance, and cast me out like I had never existed. But I had 47 hours of downloaded files sitting on my laptop. I had a forged signature I could prove was forged. I had questions that someone, somewhere, was going to have to answer. And I had something they had never counted on. Nothing left to lose. I opened my desk drawer and looked at the small pile of documents I had started collecting. Old birthday cards, family newsletters, the graduation program from yesterday, with its glossy photo of the family that didn't include me. Some answers aren't found online, I thought. Some are behind frosted office doors and receptionist smiles. I closed the drawer and started making a list of everyone who might know something. Lawyers, accountants, distant relatives, anyone who had been present when my grandmother's estate was settled. Anyone who might remember what her original wishes had been. The list was short, but it was a start. I looked out the window at the city stretching toward the harbor, gray and indifferent and vast. I'm coming for you, I thought. All of you. And this time, I'm not going to be the one who disappears. The law office of Harrison and Webb occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower in the financial district, the kind of building where the elevator smelled like expensive cologne, and the receptionists looked like they had been hired from a modeling agency. I sat in the waiting room, my folder of downloaded documents clutched against my chest like a shield. The chairs were leather, the magazines were current. Everything whispered money and power and the quiet confidence of people who had never been erased from a family photo. Ms. Prescott? A young associate appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. Mr. Webb will see you now. Jonathan Webb was exactly what I had expected. Silver-haired, square-jawed, with the kind of tan that came from golf courses and yacht clubs. He shook my hand with practiced warmth and gestured toward a chair that probably cost more than my monthly rent. So, he said, settling behind his desk, you mentioned an inheritance dispute. Tell me what's going on. I laid out the basics, the graduation ceremony, the public disownment, the forged signature I had discovered on the property transfer. I showed him the documents I had downloaded, the comparison between my real signature and the fake one. Webb listened attentively, nodding in all the right places. He seemed genuinely interested, right up until I mentioned the family name. Prescott? He set down the document he had been examining. As in the Prescott Foundation? Victoria and Theodore Prescott? Yes. They're my parents. Something shifted in his expression. The warmth drained away, replaced by something more careful, more calculated. I see. He leaned back in his chair. Ms. Prescott, I'm afraid there might be a conflict of interest here. My firm has done some work for the Foundation in the past. Nothing major, but enough that I wouldn't feel comfortable taking this case. What kind of work? I'm not at liberty to say. Attorney-client privilege. He was already standing, already moving toward the door. I wish you the best, Ms. Prescott. Perhaps another firm would be better suited to your needs. He handed me back my documents and showed me out with the efficiency of someone disposing of an inconvenient problem. I stood on the sidewalk outside the building, the June sun beating down on my shoulders, and felt the first real flicker of doubt. The Prescott name had always opened doors for Vivian, for my parents, for anyone who bore it with pride. For me, it was starting to feel like a cage. 3 days later, I decided to try a different approach. The Prescott Foundation headquarters occupied a renovated brownstone in Back Bay, tasteful, historic, exactly the kind of building that photographed well in annual reports. I had been here 100 times growing up, for galas and board meetings and the endless parade of donor events that my mother orchestrated like military campaigns. I walked in without calling ahead. The receptionist, a young woman I didn't recognize, looked up with a professional smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Victoria Prescott." "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm her daughter." The smile faltered. She glanced at her computer screen, then back at me, clearly uncertain how to proceed. I'll let her know you're here." 2 minutes later, I was walking down the familiar hallway toward my mother's corner office. The walls were lined with photos of foundation events, groundbreakings, ribbon cuttings, my mother shaking hands with mayors and senators, and the occasional minor celebrity. In every photo, she looked exactly the same, polished, powerful, in complete control. She didn't look up when I entered. "Eleanor," her voice was smooth, unsurprised. "I wondered when you would come. We need to talk." "Do we?" She finally raised her eyes from her computer screen. "I thought your father made our position quite clear." "Your position." I closed the door behind me. "Not mine." The office hadn't changed since I was a child. White orchids on the windowsill, award plaques arranged in precise rows, a framed magazine headline that read Victoria Prescott, mother, philanthropist, visionary. Everything perfectly curated, perfectly controlled, just like her. "I regret that you felt hurt," she said, folding her hands on the desk. "But we did what was best for the family's image. Surely you can understand that." "You didn't regret the decision. You regret how it looked." Her lips thinned almost imperceptibly. "Perception is reality, Eleanor. I thought I taught you that." "You taught me a lot of things." I remained standing, refusing to take the chair she hadn't offered. "Like how to forge signatures, apparently." For just a moment, a fraction of a second, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise? Fear? It was gone before I could identify it, replaced by the familiar mask of composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Cape Elizabeth property. The transfer to Ashford Holdings. My signature on documents I never signed. That was a routine administrative matter. The lawyers handled it." "The lawyers forged my name." She stood, moving to the window, her back to me. "You're still welcome at family events, Eleanor. As a guest. But you need to understand the difference between being part of something and being entitled to it." "The difference between family and furniture, you mean." "Don't be dramatic." She turned, and for just a moment, I saw something beneath the polish. Exhaustion, maybe, or the weight of maintaining control for so many years. We can't have every branch growing in a different direction. People notice. They talk. And talk becomes doubt, and doubt becomes distance, and distance becomes— She trailed off. "Becomes what?" "Poverty." The word came out flat, hard. "Irrelevance. Erasure." I stared at her, trying to reconcile this woman with the mother I remembered from childhood, the one who had praised my eye for design, who had let me choose the font for the family crest, who had once called me her creative one. That woman was gone. Maybe she had never existed at all. "I hope they do notice," I said quietly. "I hope they all notice." I turned and walked out without waiting for her response. The Foundation's annual summer gala was held 2 weeks later in a hotel ballroom overlooking the harbor. Crystal chandeliers, string quartet, waiters circulating with champagne, and canapes worth more than my weekly grocery budget. I had RSVP'd 6 months ago, back when I still believed I was part of this family. Now I attended as what I had become, a ghost at the feast. My badge said guest again. No name, no family crest. Just a reminder of my status, or lack thereof. I kept to the edges of the room, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching my family work the crowd. Victoria moved from group to group like a queen holding court, her laugh precisely calibrated for each audience. Theodore followed in her wake, charming when required, silent when permitted. And Vivian, radiant in a red dress that probably cost more than my car, accepted compliments and business cards with the gracious efficiency of someone who had been groomed for this her entire life. No one approached me. No one asked how I was doing or why I was standing alone. A few people glanced in my direction, then quickly looked away as if my exile might be contagious. Then came the toast. Theodore stepped up to the microphone, champagne glass raised, and launched into his standard speech about the Foundation's mission, its impact, its bright future. I had heard variations of this speech a dozen times. I knew every pause, every humble brag, every carefully practiced moment of spontaneity. But tonight, he added something new. And of course, he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom, none of this would be possible without the dedication of our only daughter, Vivian, whose brilliance continues to guide this family forward. Only daughter. The words hung in the air like smoke. A few heads turned toward me, then quickly turned away. Vivian raised her glass, her smile unwavering, though I could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew what he had said. She knew what it meant. And she said nothing. I set down my glass carefully, precisely, on the nearest table. I didn't trust myself to hold it any longer. Only daughter. Said publicly, in front of donors and board members and everyone who mattered. Another nail in the coffin of my existence. I walked toward the exit, keeping my pace steady, my face composed. No one stopped me. No one called my name. Outside, the night air was warm and heavy with the smell of the harbor. I walked 2 blocks before I trusted myself to stop, to lean against a lamppost, to breathe. Something had cracked inside me during that toast, clean and final, like a bone breaking. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a family disagreement that could be resolved with time and therapy. This was erasure, polished and gift-wrapped, presented to the world as simple fact. I had one choice left: accept it or fight. I pulled out my phone and texted the one person who had offered to help. Daniel, I'm ready to talk. I met Aunt Mavis for lunch 3 days later at a cafe in Providence, halfway between her townhouse and Boston. Neutral territory, safe ground, or so I thought. She looked older than I remembered, her hair grayer, her hands less steady as she lifted her coffee cup, but her eyes were the same, kind, worried, carrying the weight of secrets she had never quite learned to share. Thank you for meeting me, I said. Of course, honey. I've been thinking about you. About everything. I told her what I had found: the forged signature, the property transfer, the encrypted files I couldn't access. I showed her the documents on my phone, watching her face for any sign of surprise or recognition. She nodded slowly, heavily. I suspected something like this. Your mother. She's always been so careful about controlling things, controlling people. I need to know more, Aunt Mavis. About the original will. About what my grandmother actually wanted. Elise loved you. Mavis reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She told me so, many times. Whatever Victoria says, whatever she's done. Your grandmother wanted you to have that house. She wanted you to have a place that was truly yours. Then why did they change it? Why did they forge my signature? Because Victoria couldn't stand the thought of anything being out of her control. And because... She hesitated, looking down at her coffee. Because she's always been afraid, Eleanor. Afraid of losing everything she built. It doesn't excuse what she did, but fear makes people do terrible things. We talked for 2 more hours. I told her about my plan to hire a lawyer, to challenge the property transfer, to find proof that my grandmother's wishes had been violated. She listened, nodded, offered encouragement. Be careful, she said as we parted. Victoria doesn't lose gracefully. I know. I drove back to Boston feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Finally, I had an ally, someone inside the family who believed me, who would help me. 3 days later, I received an email from my mother. Eleanor, I heard you've been researching. Aunt Mavis was worried about you, so she reached out to share her concerns. Perhaps it's time we had a family discussion about appropriate boundaries. I trust you'll make the right choice. Mother. I read the email 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. Then I called Mavis. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with tears. Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You told her. You told her everything. She threatened me. Mavis was openly crying now. She said she would tell everyone about Harold, about what he did. The money he took from the foundation. My blood went cold. What money? 15 years ago, before he died. Harold was the foundation's accountant, and he borrowed money, $200,000. He was going to pay it back, but then he got sick and Victoria covered it up. She said it was a loan, a family matter, but she kept the records. She said if I didn't tell her what you were planning, she would release everything. She would destroy his memory. I sat down heavily on my couch, the phone pressed against my ear, listening to my aunt sob. I trusted you, I said. You were the only person in this family I trusted. I know, Eleanor. I'm so sorry. I was weak. I was scared. You told her everything. My evidence. My plans. Everything. I didn't know what else to do. She had me trapped. She's had me trapped for 15 years. The betrayal settled into my chest like a stone. Mavis wasn't evil. She was just another victim of Victoria's machine, used, discarded, kept in line through fear and secrets. But understanding didn't make it hurt any less. I have to go, I said. Eleanor, please. I hung up. I had lost my last ally in the family, and now Victoria knew exactly what I was planning. They moved fast. Within a week, I started noticing things. A car parked across the street from my apartment that hadn't been there before. The same car every day with a driver who pretended to read a newspaper. At work, my supervisor called me into her office. Eleanor, someone called asking about your employment history. They said they were from a background check company, but when I asked for credentials, they hung up. Did they give a name? No, but they asked very specific questions about your reliability, your mental health, whether you had ever exhibited erratic behavior. I knew who was behind it. I just couldn't prove it. On social media, Vivian posted a series of carefully crafted messages about family values and knowing who your true supporters are and cutting toxic influences from your life. She never named me directly, but the subtext was clear enough. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly stopped responding to my messages. The isolation was slow, methodical, and devastatingly effective. One evening, Rachel from work caught me in the break room. Hey, are you okay? You seem, I don't know, stressed. I'm fine. The lie came automatically. Because if you ever need to talk, she hesitated. I don't know what's going on with you, but you seem really sad, and I just wanted you to know that not everyone here believes whatever they're hearing. I looked at her, this cheerful, uncomplicated woman who had no idea what kind of war I was fighting, and felt something crack in my chest. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. They're not done with you yet. Watch the news tomorrow. I didn't sleep. The story broke at 7 a.m. on a local gossip site, the kind of outlet that traded in rumors and innuendo and just enough plausible deniability to avoid lawsuits. Prescott family's black sheep. Inside, the secret life of Eleanor Prescott. I stared at the headline on my phone, my coffee growing cold in my hand. The article was devastating. It painted me as unstable, troubled, a disappointment to my accomplished family. It referenced sources close to the Prescotts who described my erratic behavior and history of poor decisions. But the centerpiece was a photograph. It showed me at a college party 8 years ago, holding what appeared to be drugs. The image was grainy, clearly cropped from a larger photo, but the implication was unmistakable. I remembered that party. I remembered that moment. It was Halloween, and I had been holding a prop cigarette for a friend who was dressed as a 1920s flapper. The drugs were candy cigarettes, the kind you could buy at any costume shop, but the edited photo told a different story. And the internet believed what it wanted to believe. By noon, the story had spread. Comments sections filled with strangers calling me a junkie and a disgrace. My work email pinged with a message from HR requesting a meeting to discuss recent developments. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, watching my reputation disintegrate in real time. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I can help. My name is Daniel Ashford. I'm a journalist. Meet me at the cafe on Newberry Street at 3. I had nothing left to lose. Daniel was already there when I arrived, A man in his mid-30s with tired eyes and a messenger bag that had seen better days. He stood when I approached, offering a handshake that was firm but not aggressive. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You said you could help. I'm listening." We sat in a corner booth, away from the windows. He ordered black coffee. I ordered nothing. "I've been investigating the Prescott Foundation for 2 years," Daniel said, pulling a folder from his bag. "Financial irregularities, questionable disbursements. The kind of things that don't show up unless you know where to look." "Why?" "Because that's my job. I work for a nonprofit watchdog site. We investigate charities that aren't as charitable as they claim to be." He opened the folder and slid a document across the table. "Your family's financials don't add up. Donations come in, but the money doesn't always go where it's supposed to. I've been trying to find someone willing to talk about it." "And you think I'm that someone?" "I think you've been wronged, and I think you might have evidence that could help both of us." I studied him, looking for signs of deception. All I saw was exhaustion and a kind of stubborn determination that I recognized because I felt it myself. "How do I know you're not using me?" I asked. "How do I know you won't just take what I give you and disappear?" "You don't." He met my eyes steadily. "But I can prove I'm legitimate. And right now, I can do something your family didn't expect. I can debunk that photo." He pulled out his phone and showed me an image, the original, unedited photo from that Halloween party. Me in a flapper costume, holding candy cigarettes, laughing with friends. No drugs. No scandal. Just a college student at a costume party. "Where did you get this?" "One of your college friends posted it on social media years ago. It's still there if you know where to look. The gossip site cropped it, changed the lighting, added some blur. Classic manipulation." "Can you prove it was manipulated?" "Already done. I've got a photo forensics expert ready to confirm. The question is, do you want me to publish?" I looked at the photo, my younger self, happy and innocent and unaware of everything that would come, and made my decision. Publish it. Burn them down. Daniel's story ran 2 days later. Prescott scandal debunked, how a gossip site manipulated photos to smear Eleanor Prescott. The original gossip article was quietly retracted. My HR meeting was canceled. Rachel brought me a cupcake with a candle in it and said, "I told you not everyone believes the bullshit." But the damage wasn't fully undone. Some people still looked at me sideways in the hallway. Some friends still didn't return my calls. Mudsticks, even after you prove it was thrown unfairly. Still, I had won a battle, and more importantly, I had found an ally. Daniel connected me with Philip Carver, a lawyer who specialized in inheritance fraud and had no connections to the Prescott name. Philip's office was nothing like the glass tower I had visited before. It occupied a converted warehouse in South Boston, all exposed brick and industrial lighting, with case files stacked in precarious towers on every surface. Philip himself was equally unpolished, rumpled suit, coffee-stained tie, the kind of haircut you get when you're too busy to visit a barber. But his eyes were sharp, and he listened without interrupting while I laid out my case. "This is complicated," he said finally, flipping through my documents. "But not impossible. The forged signature is your strongest evidence. If we can prove it's not your handwriting, the entire property transfer becomes fraudulent." "What do you need from me?" "Everything you have. Every document, every email, every piece of evidence. And we need to find the original will, the one your grandmother actually signed before your family's lawyers got involved." "How do we do that?" "Your grandmother used a different notary before she passed, someone independent, not connected to the family. If that person kept records, and notaries are required to, there might be a copy of the original will somewhere." I thought about it. Grandmother Elise had been meticulous about her affairs. She wouldn't have trusted Victoria with something as important as her final wishes. "Catherine Holloway," I said suddenly. My grandmother mentioned her once. She said Catherine was the only honest notary in Rhode Island. Philip nodded. "Find her. If she exists, if she has records, that's our smoking gun." Daniel called me that evening with news that turned everything upside down. "I found something," he said, "about the Cape Elizabeth property." "What kind of something?" "It wasn't just transferred, Eleanor. It was sold 2 years ago to an LLC called Ashford Holdings." I already knew that much. I found the transfer documents. But did you find where the money went? Silence. I pulled the LLC's registration, Daniel continued. The registered agent is a business attorney in Boston, the same attorney your sister posted about on LinkedIn 6 weeks ago. They're partners in her new investment firm. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Vivian, I said. Vivian owns Ashford Holdings. Vivian owns Ashford Holdings. Your grandmother's beach house was sold, using your forged signature, to fund your sister's startup. The money that should have been your inheritance is currently financing luxury real estate investments. I sat down heavily on my couch, phone pressed against my ear, trying to process what I was hearing. There's more, Daniel said. The notary who certified your signature on the transfer documents? Tabitha Prescott. She received a consulting fee from the foundation the same month the transfer was processed, $20,000. My mother paid her to forge my signature. That's what it looks like. We can't prove intent yet, but the paper trail is there. This isn't just family drama anymore, Eleanor. This is fraud, forgery, possibly conspiracy. I thought about the beach house, the cedar shingles, the rocking chairs on the porch, the summer afternoons I had spent painting shutters while my father grilled salmon on the back deck. That house was supposed to be my inheritance, the one thing my grandmother had wanted me to have, and my family had stolen it to fund Vivian's empire. My grandmother would have been horrified, I said quietly. I'm sorry, Daniel said. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. No. I took a deep breath. It's exactly what I needed to hear. Now I know what I'm fighting for. The next morning, I drove to Providence. Catherine Holloway had been a notary public for 40 years before retiring 8 years ago. I found her name in old property records, cross-referenced with my grandmother's estate documents. She had notarized dozens of documents for Elise Prescott over the years, everything from property deeds to trust amendments. If anyone had a copy of the original will, it was her. The nursing home was smaller than I expected, a converted Victorian house with a wraparound porch and a garden full of roses. Catherine's son, Robert, met me at the door. Ms. Prescott? He didn't offer to shake hands. I got your message. I'm not sure this is a good idea. I just want to talk to her about my grandmother. My mother has good days and bad days. Today is... He hesitated. Today is somewhere in between. Please, this is important. Something in my voice must have convinced him, because he stepped aside and led me down a hallway decorated with watercolor paintings and framed photographs of residents. Catherine Holloway sat in a wheelchair by the window, wrapped in a hand-knitted blanket, watching the garden with eyes that seemed focused on something far away. She was smaller than I expected, frail, delicate, with paper-thin skin and white hair like spun cotton. Mom, Robert touched her shoulder gently. Someone's here to see you, about Elise Prescott. Catherine turned, and for a moment, her eyes focused on me with surprising clarity. You have her eyes, she said. Elise's eyes. I knelt beside her wheelchair. You knew my grandmother? Knew her? A small smile crossed her face. I was her notary for 30 years. Stubborn woman, knew exactly what she wanted and wouldn't take no for an answer. She studied me more closely. You're the younger one, Eleanor. Yes, she talked about you, said you were the one who understood, the one who listened. Catherine's hand trembled as she reached out to touch my face. She was worried about you, worried about what would happen after she was gone. Mrs. Holloway, I need to ask you something important, about my grandmother's will. The will, her expression clouded. There were 2 of them, you know. 2 wills. My heart began to race. 2? The one she wanted, and the one they made her sign. Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. She came to me after, said her daughter-in-law had convinced her to change things, but she didn't want it. She wanted you to have the house. Do you have a copy of the original will? I keep copies of everything. Harold always said I was paranoid, but I told him, you never know when someone will need the truth. She looked at her son. Robert, the safety deposit box, the one in Newport. Robert's expression shifted from skepticism to understanding. Mom, are you sure? I'm sure. Catherine turned back to me, her eyes suddenly sharp and clear. They pressured me to retire, you know. Your mother's people. Said I was getting too old, making too many mistakes, but I never made a mistake in 40 years. They just didn't want anyone around who remembered what Elise really wanted. She reached into a small jewelry box on the table beside her and produced a brass key, tarnished with age. "This opens the box," she said, pressing it into my hand. "Find the truth, Eleanor. Your grandmother would have wanted that." I looked at the key, small, ordinary, holding the weight of everything I had been searching for. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you." Robert walked me to the door, his attitude considerably warmer than when I had arrived. "The Prescotts," he said quietly. "They're the reason my mother retired early. I never knew the whole story, but I knew they pressured her, threatened her license." He paused. "Whatever you find in that box, I hope it's enough to make things right." I drove back to Boston with the key clutched in my hand, hope burning in my chest for the first time in weeks. The answers were close now. I could feel it. And when I found them, my family would finally have to face the truth they had tried so hard to bury. 1 week passed. 7 days of waiting, of checking my phone every hour, of jumping at every notification. I had given Robert Holloway my number before leaving the nursing home, but I hadn't heard from him since. The brass key sat on my nightstand, a constant reminder of hope deferred. I was beginning to think he had changed his mind when my phone finally rang. "Ms. Prescott?" Robert's voice was hesitant. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all." I sat up straighter, heart pounding. "Is everything okay? Is your mother—" "She's fine. Better than fine, actually. She had a really good day yesterday." He paused. "She mentioned your grandmother's name again, and she said something I think you need to hear." "What did she say?" "She talked about the real papers and the safety deposit box. She was very clear about it, clearer than she's been in months. She said—" Another pause. "She said there were 2 versions of your grandmother's will, and the one your family is using isn't the one Elise actually wanted." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of confirmation settle over me. "I believe her," Robert continued. "After what you told me about how the Prescotts pressured her to retire, after seeing her face when she talked about your grandmother, I believe her." "The safety deposit box," I said. "Do you know where it is?" "Newport. First National Bank on Thames Street. She opened it decades ago before she retired. Kept copies of important documents there, things she thought might matter someday." He exhaled slowly. "I'll go with you if you want, help you access it. Mom gave me power of attorney when she moved into the home." "Robert, why are you helping me?" Silence stretched across the line. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because my mother was a good woman, a honest woman, and your family tried to destroy her career because she wouldn't lie for them." He cleared his throat. "And because some things are more important than staying out of trouble." We agreed to meet in Newport the following morning. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The drive to Newport took just over an hour. Robert met me in the parking lot of the First National Bank, a stately brick building that had probably been standing since before the Revolution. He looked tired, worried, but determined. "I called ahead," he said as we walked toward the entrance. "They're expecting us." The process was surprisingly simple. Robert presented his power of attorney documents, signed several forms, and within 20 minutes we were being led into a vault lined with rows of identical metal boxes. Box 447 was in the 3rd row from the bottom. My hands trembled as I inserted the brass key Catherine had given me. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was a single manila envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with brittle tape that cracked when I touched it. I looked at Robert. He nodded. I opened the envelope. Inside were several documents, neatly organized and paper-clipped together. The first was a letter, handwritten on cream-colored stationery I recognized immediately. My grandmother's personal letterhead, with the small embossed rose she had always loved. "To whom it may concern, I am writing this letter to accompany my last will and testament, executed on March 15, 2016, and notarized by Catherine Holloway of Providence, Rhode Island. I have been pressured by members of my family to alter this will. I have refused. The document contained in this envelope represents my true and final wishes regarding the distribution of my estate. If you are reading this, it likely means that someone has attempted to substitute a different will after my death. Please know that any will dated after March 15th, 2016 does not reflect my intentions and should be considered invalid. My granddaughter Eleanor has always understood me in ways the rest of my family could not. She listened when others talked. She saw what others overlooked. I want her to have the beach house in Bar Harbor, the place where we spent our happiest summers together. I want her to have a majority stake in the family trust, so that she will have the financial independence to live life on her own terms. Victoria will not be pleased by these decisions. She has never approved of Eleanor, though I have never understood why. Perhaps she sees too much of herself in her, the hunger, the ambition, the refusal to be invisible. But I have made my choice, and I stand by it. Eleanor, if you are reading this, I love you. I have always loved you. Do not let them erase you. With all my love, Elise, Margaret Prescott. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Behind it was the will itself, a formal legal document, properly witnessed and notarized, dated March 15th, 2016, 2 years before the will currently being used by my family. And there, in black and white, was everything Catherine had promised. Eleanor Prescott was named as the primary beneficiary of the Bar Harbor property. Eleanor Prescott was granted a majority stake in the Prescott Family Trust. Eleanor Prescott was to receive first consideration in all matters relating to the family's charitable endeavors. I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the disappointment. I was the one my grandmother had chosen. Philip's reaction when I showed him the documents was the closest I had ever seen him come to actual excitement. "This is it," he said, spreading the papers across his cluttered desk. "This is exactly what we needed." Can they challenge it? Claim she wasn't competent when she signed it? They can try. He pulled out a file from one of his towering stacks. But I anticipated that. I've already obtained your grandmother's medical records from 2016. She had a full cognitive assessment 3 months before this will was signed, completely competent. Sharp as a tack, according to her doctor. So the newer will was obtained through undue influence at best, fraud at worst. The letter your grandmother wrote makes it clear she was pressured to change her wishes. Combined with the forged signature on the property transfer, the pattern of manipulation is unmistakable. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the magnitude of what I was holding. This wasn't just about the beach house anymore. This was about control of the family trust. This was about everything my grandmother had built over a lifetime. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we file." Philip began organizing the documents into a legal folder. "We petition the court to invalidate the current will and recognize this one as your grandmother's true final testament. We challenge the property transfer as fraudulent, and we request an immediate freeze on any further disbursements from the trust until the matter is resolved." How long will it take? Months, probably. Your family has resources. They'll fight hard. They'll hire the best lawyers, try every procedural trick in the book. He looked at me steadily. "This will get ugly, Eleanor. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the graduation ceremony, the ghost badge, the toast to our only daughter, the forged signature and the stolen house, and the years of being erased, piece by piece, from my own family. "I've been ready my whole life," I said. I just didn't know it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of meetings, documents, and strategy sessions. Philip explained the legal landscape in terms I could understand. The will challenge would be heard in probate court. The fraud allegations might trigger a separate criminal investigation, though that would take longer. The foundation's tax filings were also potentially problematic. If the property sale was fraudulent, the deductions they had claimed might constitute tax fraud. "We're not just challenging a will," Philip said during one of our marathon sessions. "We're pulling on a thread that could unravel everything they've built." "Good," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You're sure? Because once we file, there's no going back. Your family will know exactly what you have and what you're claiming. They'll have every incentive to destroy you. They've already tried to destroy me. The difference is now I can fight back." We filed the petition on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing off the hook with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages were what I expected. Victoria's lawyer requesting an urgent meeting to discuss this matter. A board member from the foundation expressing concern about my rash actions. Even Aunt Mavis tearfully begging me to reconsider. I deleted them all. The only message I kept was from Daniel. Heard you filed. This is about to get interesting. Call me when you're ready to talk. I was ready. We met at a coffee shop in Cambridge, neutral territory, away from prying eyes. Daniel looked different than the last time I had seen him. More rested somehow, more hopeful. He ordered his usual black coffee and slid into the booth across from me. My editor wants the Prescott story, he said without preamble. Full exposé, financial irregularities, forged documents, family drama, the works. It could be the biggest piece we've published all year. And you're telling me this because I want you to have a say in when it runs. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. Legally, I don't need your permission. Everything I have is from public records and independent sources. But ethically, he sighed, I've gotten to know you, Eleanor. I don't want to publish something that could hurt your case or put you in danger. I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation. All I saw was genuine conflict, a journalist torn between his professional obligations and something more personal. What would happen if you published now? I asked. Public opinion would probably shift in your favor. The foundation would face immediate scrutiny. Donors would start asking questions. Your family would be on the defensive. But it could also prejudice the court. Your family's lawyers could argue that the media coverage made a fair hearing impossible. They could use it to delay, to obfuscate, to drag things out even longer. What do you think I should do? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I think you should let me hold the story until after the first hearing. Once the court has seen the evidence, once the fraud is officially on record, then we publish. That way, the story becomes confirmation of what the court already found, not speculation that might influence the outcome. It was smart, strategic, the kind of thinking I had come to expect from him. Why? I asked. Why are you doing this? You could publish right now and make your career. He met my eyes steadily. Because some things matter more than a byline, and because, he hesitated, because I've seen what your family did to you, and I don't want to be another person who uses you and walks away. Something shifted between us in that moment. Not romantic, not yet, but something deeper, an understanding, a recognition of shared values. Hold the story, I said. Until after the hearing. He nodded. I'll tell my editor it needs more verification. That should buy us a few weeks. Thank you, Daniel. Don't thank me yet. He smiled slightly. This is far from over. 3 days before the preliminary hearing, I received an unexpected call. Eleanor, Mavis's voice was barely above a whisper. Please, don't hang up. I almost did. My finger hovered over the end call button, ready to silence her the way she had silenced my trust. But something in her voice stopped me. Fear, desperation, and something else, something that sounded almost like hope. What do you want, Mavis? Victoria broke her promise. The words came out in a rush. She told me if I kept her informed about your plans, she would keep Harold's secret safe, but now she's planning to release everything anyway. At the Foundation Gala next month, she's going to use Harold's scandal to distract from her own problems. I felt a cold satisfaction at the news. Victoria betraying her allies the same way she had betrayed me. Why should I care? I asked. You betrayed me first. I know, Eleanor. I was weak. I was scared. Mavis was crying now, her words thick with tears. But if she's going to destroy Harold's memory anyway, then I have nothing left to protect. And that means I can finally do something right. What are you talking about? I have recordings, Eleanor. Audio from board meetings, private conversations, things Victoria said when she thought no one was listening. Mavis's voice steadied. She talked about you, about the will, about how she handled your grandmother. It's all on tape. My heart began to pound. How? Harold taught me. Before he got sick, he was worried about Victoria. He started recording meetings, keeping records. I found his files after he died and continued the practice. She laughed bitterly. Paranoid, both of us, but paranoid people keep evidence. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I was a coward, because I thought I could protect Harold's reputation and help you at the same time. But I was wrong. Victoria was never going to keep her word. She uses people, Eleanor. She uses everyone. And when they're no longer useful, she discards them. I thought about the beach house, the forged signature, the graduation speech. Send me the recordings, I said. I'll do better than that. I'll send them to your journalist friend. That way, even if Victoria tries to silence me, the truth will already be out. The files arrived in my inbox the next morning. 12 audio recordings ranging from 3 minutes to over an hour. I listened to them in my apartment, alone, with the curtains drawn and my phone turned off. Victoria's voice filled the room, smooth, confident, utterly ruthless. We only use Vivian's face in marketing. Eleanor doesn't photograph well with our narrative. I heard my father's voice. We need to be careful what Eleanor finds. She used to read everything. And then, in a recording from what sounded like a private conversation with a board member, the foundation is mine. I built it. Elise had no right to divide it differently. Whatever her will says, whatever she wanted, this is my legacy, not hers. Another recording from a meeting I wasn't present for. What about Eleanor's share? Someone asked. Victoria's response. Eleanor doesn't need to know what she's entitled to. What she doesn't know can't hurt us. I listened until I couldn't listen anymore. Then I sat in the darkness, my grandmother's letter clutched in my hands, and let myself feel the full weight of what my family had done. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They had erased my grandmother's final wishes. They had treated her legacy like an inconvenience to be managed, her love for me like a problem to be solved. Philip called that evening. I told him about the recordings. This is powerful, he said, but we need to be strategic about when and how we use it. Or, I said slowly, we could let someone else release it first. I woke to chaos. My phone was exploding with notifications, missed calls, text messages, news alerts, all blending together into a cacophony of digital panic. The headline on my screen told me everything I needed to know. Luxury charity? Anonymous sources question integrity at Prescott Foundation. The story had broken on Daniel's watchdog site at midnight, but it hadn't come from Daniel. I called him immediately. I didn't publish this, he said, answering on the first ring. I swear to you, Eleanor, this wasn't me. Then who? I don't know. The story uses sources I've never seen, audio files I didn't have access to. Someone leaked directly to the site's tip line. I thought about Mavis, about her promise to send the recordings, about her desperate need to do something right. I think I know who it was, I said. I called Mavis next. She answered on the third ring, her voice calm in a way I had never heard before. You leaked the recordings, I said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Why? I told you to send them to Daniel. We had a plan. The plan was too slow. Mavis's voice was steady. Victoria was going to release Harold's scandal at the gala. I couldn't wait for courts and lawyers and proper procedures. I needed the truth out there before she could spin it. Mavis, I know you're angry. I know this complicates things, but Eleanor... Her voice finally cracked. For 15 years, I let that woman control me. I let her use my husband's memory as a weapon. I let her hurt you because I was too afraid to fight back. This was the only way I knew to make it right. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her for acting without consulting me. Part of me understood exactly why she had done it. What happens now? I asked. Now, Mavis said, we watch them burn. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Within hours of the story breaking, the Prescott Foundation's largest donors began publicly distancing themselves. A tech billionaire who had pledged $5 million announced he was pausing his commitment pending further review. A prominent family foundation that had partnered with the Prescotts for years issued a statement expressing concern and disappointment. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. 2 members resigned before it even started. Online, the story took on a life of its own. The audio clips spread across social media, accompanied by commentary that ranged from outraged to gleeful. Hashtag Prescott Scandal trended for most of the morning. Someone created a meme of Victoria's face with the caption, "Eleanor doesn't photograph well with our narrative." I watched from a distance, refreshing news sites obsessively, trying to gauge the damage. Philip called around noon. "This is both helpful and problematic," he said. "Helpful because public opinion is clearly shifting in your favor. Problematic because opposing counsel will argue that a fair hearing is now impossible." What do? We proceed as planned. The evidence speaks for itself, regardless of media coverage. And frankly, this kind of public pressure might make your family more willing to settle. I didn't want a settlement. I wanted justice. But I kept that thought to myself. In the afternoon, I walked to a cafe near my apartment and ordered a coffee I didn't drink. I needed to be out of my apartment, away from the constant stream of notifications, somewhere I could breathe. Rachel texted me, "Holy shit, Eleanor, are you okay? Do you need anything?" I texted back, "I'm okay, thank you for asking." She responded with a heart emoji and an offer to bring me dinner. I accepted. That evening, I watched the news coverage on my laptop. Victoria had attempted damage control, a press release about taken out of context, and family disagreements being exploited by bad actors. No one was buying it. The camera caught her leaving the foundation building that afternoon. Her signature lapel pin, the gold family crest I had helped design 20 years ago, was missing from her collar. I stared at that detail for a long time. She had worn that pin to every public event for as long as I could remember. It was part of her armor, her identity, her claim to the Prescott legacy. And now it was gone. The meeting was held at a neutral location, a conference room in a downtown law firm that represented neither party. Warren Bell, my family's longtime attorney, sat on one side of the polished table. Philip sat beside me on the other. Between us lay stacks of documents, legal pads, and the weight of everything that had brought us to this moment. "My clients are prepared to make a generous offer," Warren began, sliding a folder across the table. "Full return of the Bar Harbor property, $500,000 in cash settlement. In exchange, Ms. Prescott signs a non-disclosure agreement and agrees to pursue no further legal action against the family or the foundation." I looked at the folder but didn't open it. "What about the original will?" I asked. "My grandmother's actual wishes?" Warren's expression flickered. "That's a separate matter. The validity of the current will is still being determined by the court. So, you want me to give up my legal claims before the court has ruled on them? We want to resolve this matter quickly and privately, for everyone's benefit." Philip leaned forward. "The original will names Eleanor as the primary beneficiary of the family trust. If that will is validated, and we believe it will be, your clients stand to lose far more than a beach house and $500,000. Warren spread his hands. "Which is why we're offering to settle now. A bird in the hand, as they say." I thought about what accepting would mean. The beach house returned, money in my account, the whole nightmare over, but also an NDA. Silence. The truth buried forever. Victoria continuing to run the foundation, continuing to control the narrative, continuing to win. "What about the recordings?" I asked. "The audio of my mother admitting she disregarded my grandmother's wishes?" Warren's jaw tightened. "Those recordings were obtained without consent. Their admissibility is questionable at best." "Their content isn't questionable. She said what she said." "Ms. Prescott." Warren leaned forward, his voice dropping into what he probably thought was a paternal tone. "I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But this litigation could drag on for years. It could cost you everything you have, financially, emotionally, professionally." "Is that really what you want?" I looked at Philip. He gave me a slight nod. "What I want," I said slowly, "is for my grandmother's wishes to be honored. What I want is for the truth to be acknowledged, publicly, officially, on the record. What I want is for my family to admit what they did." I pushed the folder back across the table, unopened. "Your settlement doesn't offer any of that, so my answer is no." Warren's face hardened. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, I stood, gathering my things. But it's my mistake to make. Philip and I walked out together, leaving Warren alone with his rejected offer. In the elevator, Philip turned to me. That was the right call, but you know what comes next. War, I said. War, he agreed. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. Outside, the city bustled with ordinary life. People walking dogs, hailing cabs, living lives untouched by inheritance battles and family betrayals. I took a deep breath and stepped out into the sunlight. Then let's go to war, I said. The weeks before the trial passed in a blur of depositions, document reviews, and sleepless nights. Philip had warned me it would be intense. He hadn't warned me it would feel like having my entire life dissected under fluorescent lights by people who were paid to make me look unstable. The opposing lawyers were good, expensive, and ruthless, the kind of attorneys who billed $500 an hour and earned every penny. They questioned my mental health, my employment history, my relationships. They implied I was bitter, jealous, delusional. They suggested I had manipulated my grandmother in her final years, that I had planted evidence, that I was conducting a vendetta against my own family. I answered every question calmly, factually, refusing to take the bait. You seem very composed, one of them said during a particularly aggressive session, almost rehearsed. I seem composed, I replied, because I'm telling the truth. The truth doesn't require rehearsal. Philip told me later that I had done well. They're trying to rattle you. The fact that they can't is driving them crazy. Small victories. I collected them like coins, saving them for the days when the weight of everything threatened to crush me. The media attention continued to build. Daniel's site ran regular updates on the case, carefully factual, scrupulously fair. Other outlets picked up the story, local news, then national, then international. Wealthy families' inheritance battle became a minor sensation, the kind of story people followed like a soap opera. I tried not to read the comments. I failed mostly. Rachel brought me lunch one afternoon, soup and bread from the cafe near our office. She sat with me in the break room while I ate, not asking questions, just being present. You look tired, she said. I am tired. Is there anything I can do? I looked at her. This woman who barely knew me, who had no stake in my battle, who simply showed up day after day with small kindnesses and no expectations. You're already doing it, I said. Thank you. She smiled and squeezed my hand. That's what friends are for. Friends. I had almost forgotten what that word meant. I wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. Reports filtered back to me through Daniel's sources. The Prescott household was in chaos. Victoria had fired 3 PR consultants in as many weeks. Theodore had stopped attending board meetings entirely. And Vivian? Vivian was falling apart. Her startup had collapsed. Investors had pulled out after the scandal broke, unwilling to associate their money with a family accused of fraud. Her social media accounts, once curated showcases of luxury and success, had gone dark. Friends who had flocked to her during the good times were suddenly unavailable, their phones going straight to voicemail. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt something closer to pity. I had grown up watching Vivian perform, the perfect daughter, the golden child, the one who did everything right. I had envied her, resented her, sometimes even hated her, but I had never really seen her. Now, watching her world crumble, I began to understand something I had missed all those years. Vivian wasn't the villain. She was another victim, shaped and molded by our mother's expectations until she didn't know who she was without them. She had traded her authenticity for approval, her identity for success. And now that the approval was gone, there was nothing left. I didn't reach out to her. I wasn't ready for that, and I doubted she would welcome it anyway. But I stopped hating her. That felt like progress. The call came on a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin. Ms. Prescott, this is James Whitmore, Vivian's husband. He paused. Or soon-to-be ex-husband, I suppose. I sat down slowly, my heart pounding. Mr. Whitmore, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I wasn't expecting to call. His voice was tired, strained, the voice of a man who had been carrying a heavy weight for too long. But there are things you need to know, things that might help your case. Why would you want to help me? Your wife, my wife, lied to me. The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. About a lot of things, but specifically about documents she signed using my name. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of documents? Transfer authorizations, account access forms, things related to the Bar Harbor property sale. He exhaled slowly. She forged my signature, Eleanor. She used my identity to move money without my knowledge or consent. And when I confronted her about it, she told me I was being paranoid, that I should trust the family. When did you find out the truth? After the recordings leaked, I started going through our financial records, really going through them, not just glancing at statements like I used to, and I found discrepancies, large ones. Another pause. I confronted her again. This time, she didn't deny it. She just said it was for the family and that I wouldn't understand. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. That must have been devastating. It was. It is. His voice cracked slightly. I spent 5 years believing I knew my wife. I didn't. I married a performance, not a person. And the worst part is, I don't think she even knows the difference anymore. We sat in silence for a moment, two strangers connected by the wreckage of the same family. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Because I'm done being complicit. James's voice steadied. I've spoken with my own lawyer. I'm prepared to testify about the forged signatures, the financial irregularities, everything I know. Your attorney can contact me to arrange a deposition. James, this will destroy Vivian. You understand that? Vivian destroyed herself a long time ago. She just didn't notice because she was too busy destroying everyone else. He paused. And maybe if she finally faces consequences, she'll have a chance to become someone real. Someone who doesn't need to lie and steal and manipulate to feel worthwhile. I didn't know if I believed that, but I understood why he wanted to. Thank you, I said, for coming forward, for telling the truth. Don't thank me yet, he replied. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Suffolk County Courthouse was exactly as Philip had described it, functional, unglamorous, smelling faintly of old carpet and bureaucratic exhaustion. No dramatic marble columns or soaring ceilings, just rows of wooden benches, fluorescent lights, and the quiet hum of justice grinding slowly forward. I arrived early, dressed in a simple navy suit that I hoped conveyed seriousness without trying too hard. Philip met me in the hallway, his tie slightly crooked as always, a thick folder of documents tucked under his arm. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. We entered the courtroom together. They were already there, my family, arranged at the opposing table like a tableau of fallen royalty. Victoria sat ramrod straight, her face a mask of controlled composure, though I could see the tension in her jaw, the tightness around her eyes. Theodore slumped beside her, smaller somehow, his distinguished gray temples now just making him look old and tired. Vivian sat at the end, scrolling through her phone with the mechanical detachment of someone who had stopped caring about outcomes. None of them looked at me. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s named Margaret Chin, with tired eyes and an expression that suggested she had seen every possible variation of human greed and pettiness. She called the hearing to order with brisk efficiency. Philip's opening statement was measured and precise. He laid out the facts. The original will, dated 2016, naming me as primary beneficiary. The subsequent will, obtained under circumstances suggesting undue influence. The forged signature on the property transfer. The audio recordings demonstrating Victoria's stated intention to disregard my grandmother's wishes. This is not a case of family disagreement, Philip concluded. This is a case of systematic fraud. Fraud against Eleanor Prescott, and fraud against the memory of Elise Prescott, whose final wishes were deliberately subverted by those she trusted most. The opposing counsel, a silver-haired man named Richard Hartley, painted a different picture. He spoke of family misunderstandings and emotional distress, and a young woman who, sadly, has allowed her grievances to cloud her judgment. He implied that I had manipulated my grandmother, that I had fabricated evidence, that I was conducting a vendetta born of jealousy and spite. I listened without flinching. I had heard it all before. The first day was devoted to establishing facts, the chain of custody for the original will, the expert testimony on signature analysis, the timeline of events. Dry, technical, necessary. When court adjourned for the evening, I walked out alone, past the reporters gathered on the courthouse steps, past the curious onlookers who had come to witness the spectacle. Daniel was waiting by my car. "How did it go?" he asked. "Day one of many," I replied. "No clear winner yet." "How are you holding up?" I considered the question. "I'm still standing." "That's something." He nodded. "That's everything." Day 2 began with Philip presenting the original will. He walked the judge through every detail: the date, the witnesses, the notarization by Catherine Holloway. He introduced Catherine's letter explaining the circumstances under which the will was created. He presented the medical records proving my grandmother's mental competency at the time of signing. "This document," Philip said, holding up the yellowed pages, "represents Elise Prescott's true final wishes. She wrote an accompanying letter, a letter that makes clear she anticipated attempts to alter her intentions after her death. She took precautions, she left evidence, because she knew what her family was capable of." Hartley objected repeatedly: relevance, hearsay, prejudicial. But Judge Chin overruled him each time. The evidence was solid, the chain of custody was unbroken. The truth was entering the official record, one document at a time. Then came the audio recordings. Philip had obtained permission to play selected clips for the court. The room fell silent as my mother's voice filled the space. "We only use Vivian's face in marketing. Eleanor doesn't photograph well with our narrative." "The foundation is mine. I built it. Elise had no right to divide it differently." "Eleanor doesn't need to know what she's entitled to. What she doesn't know can't hurt us." I watched Victoria as she listened to her own words. Her face remained composed, but I could see her hands, clenched in her lap, knuckles white, trembling almost imperceptibly. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother afraid. Day 3 brought the witness I had been waiting for. James Whitmore walked into the courtroom looking like a man who had made peace with the consequences of his choices. His suit was immaculate, his posture straight, his expression calm. He took the witness stand and swore to tell the truth without hesitation. Philip led him through his testimony methodically. "Mr. Whitmore, can you describe your relationship with the Prescott family?" "I married Vivian Prescott 5 years ago. I believed I was joining a successful, respected family. I've since learned that much of what I believed was untrue." "Can you explain what you mean by that?" James produced a folder of documents, copies of forms bearing his forged signature, emails between Vivian and the family attorney discussing expediting certain transfers, financial records showing money moving through accounts he had never authorized. "My wife forged my signature on multiple occasions," he said. "She used my identity to facilitate the sale of the Bar Harbor property and to move funds that rightfully belonged to Eleanor Prescott. When I discovered this and confronted her, she admitted it. She said it was for the family." The courtroom was utterly silent. Hartley's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to paint James as a bitter, estranged husband seeking revenge, a man who couldn't be trusted because his marriage had failed. James remained unshaken. "I'm not here for revenge," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here because I spent 5 years living with someone who lied to me every single day. I'm here because I was complicit in something I didn't understand, and now I do, and I can't stay silent. I'm here because the truth matters, even when it hurts." He looked directly at Vivian as he spoke. She didn't look back. She was staring at her hands, tears streaming silently down her face. Not tears of remorse, I thought. Tears of someone watching their carefully constructed world finally, irreversibly collapse. During a recess on day 4, I walked to the restroom to compose myself. The hallway was empty except for one person. My father stood near a window, staring out at the gray November sky. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow, as if the weight of the trial had compressed him into a lesser version of himself. I almost walked past without speaking, but something made me stop. Dad? He turned. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, father and daughter, strangers who shared blood and history and almost nothing else. Eleanor. His voice was hoarse. I didn't expect. I wasn't sure you would. Would what? Would speak to me after everything. I leaned against the opposite wall, keeping distance between us. I'm not sure I should be, but here we are. Silence stretched between us. Outside, a pigeon landed on the windowsill and immediately flew away. I used to take you fishing, Theodore said finally. Do you remember? Just the two of us, before sunrise, when the lake was still as glass. I remember. You were patient. More patient than Vivian ever was. You'd sit for hours, not catching anything, and you'd say it didn't matter. You said the water was enough. I remembered. I remembered feeling special during those mornings. Chosen, seen, valued, before everything changed. I don't know when I became this, Theodore said. This person who stands by while his own daughter is. He couldn't finish the sentence. You let her do it, I said quietly. Mom, you let her erase me. I know. Why? He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. Because I was afraid. The admission seemed to cost him something vital. 10 years ago, I almost lost everything. Bad investments, scandal, the whole company on the verge of collapse. Victoria saved us. She managed the crisis, controlled the narrative, kept us from becoming a cautionary tale, and after that, I let her take over. Everything, including the family. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. He met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine anguish there. I told myself I was protecting you, that keeping you away from the pressure, the expectations, the burden of being a Prescott, that it was better for you. But I was lying, to you and to myself. You were a coward. Yes. He didn't flinch from the word. I am. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to unleash 27 years of hurt and anger and betrayal. Part of me wanted to walk away without another word. But there was another part, smaller, quieter, that remembered a little girl sitting in a boat at dawn, happy just to be with her father, not needing to catch anything because the water was enough. It's too late, I said. You know that, right? Whatever happens in that courtroom, it's too late for us. I know. Theodore's voice was barely a whisper. I know, Eleanor. I just wanted you to hear me say it, even if it doesn't change anything. The recess bell rang. Time to return to the courtroom. I straightened and walked past him without another word. But at the door, I paused. The fishing trips, I said without turning around. Those were real. I want you to know, those were real for me too. I didn't wait for his response. Day 5. Closing arguments. Philip spoke for nearly an hour, weaving together the evidence into a narrative of systematic betrayal. The original will, the forged signatures, the audio recordings, James Whitmore's testimony, the pattern of behavior stretching back years, decades even. Elise Prescott knew her family, Philip concluded. She knew what they were capable of. That's why she took precautions. That's why she left evidence. That's why she wrote a letter to her granddaughter begging her not to let them win. This court has the opportunity to honor Elise Prescott's final wishes, to correct a wrong that has been allowed to fester for too long, to give Eleanor Prescott what was always rightfully hers. Hartley's closing was technically competent but hollow. He spoke of reasonable doubt and family disputes and the dangers of litigation driven by emotion. But the evidence was overwhelming, and everyone in the room knew it. Judge Chin retired to consider her decision. We waited. 3 hours later, she returned. The courtroom fell silent as she took her seat. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, in my fingertips, in every nerve ending. In the matter of Prescott versus Prescott, Judge Chin began, I have reviewed the evidence presented by both parties. The original, will dated March 2016, notarized by Catherine Holloway, has been authenticated and verified as representing the true final wishes of Elise Margaret Prescott. I stopped breathing. The subsequent will, dated 2018, shows clear signs of having been obtained through undue influence. The testimony and documentary evidence presented demonstrate a pattern of manipulation and coercion that undermines the validity of this later document. Victoria made a small sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a sob. Furthermore, the evidence of signature forgery on the Bar Harbor property transfer is conclusive. The expert testimony confirms that the signature purporting to be Eleanor Prescott's was not, in fact, made by her hand. Therefore, I rule as follows. The Bar Harbor property shall be returned to Eleanor Prescott immediately. The 2018 will is hereby declared invalid. The original 2016 will shall be recognized as the valid last testament of Elise Prescott. All disbursements made from the Prescott Family Trust in contravention of the 2016 will are to be frozen pending a full accounting and potential recovery proceedings. She paused, looking directly at Victoria. Additionally, I am referring the evidence of document fraud and potential tax violations to the State Attorney General's office for further investigation. The Prescott Foundation's operations will remain suspended until these matters are resolved. Victoria stood abruptly, her face white, her composure finally cracking. "This is outrageous! She's manipulated everyone! She's—" "Mrs. Prescott!" Judge Chen's voice was ice. "You will sit down, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." For a moment, I thought Victoria would refuse, but something in the judge's expression must have reached her because she slowly, mechanically lowered herself back into her chair. The gavel came down. "Court is adjourned." I didn't celebrate. There was a moment, walking out of the courthouse, when the reality of what had happened washed over me. I had won. After everything, the erasure, the betrayal, the years of being told I didn't belong, I had won. But the feeling wasn't triumph. It was something quieter. Relief, maybe. Or exhaustion. Or just the strange emptiness that comes when a battle you've been fighting for so long is suddenly over. Daniel was waiting outside. He pulled me into a hug that I returned without thinking. "You did it," he said. "We did it. All of us." Philip joined us, his tie finally straightened for once. "There will be appeals," he warned. "Your family won't give up easily, but the ruling is solid. The evidence is overwhelming. Even the best lawyers in the world can't argue with facts." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Over the following weeks, the fallout continued. The Attorney General opened a formal investigation into the Prescott Foundation. Several board members faced potential charges. Victoria's assets were frozen pending the outcome of the financial audit. Theodore, who had cooperated with investigators in exchange for leniency, was quietly allowed to retire from public life. Vivian and James finalized their divorce. She moved to California, I heard, starting over, trying to become someone new. I hoped, for her sake, that she succeeded. And me? I went back to my apartment in Somerville. I went back to my job at the nonprofit. I tried to remember how to live a normal life. The beach house in Bar Harbor was returned to me, as the judge had ordered. I visited it for the first time in 10 years on a cold December morning, standing on the porch my grandmother had loved, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. I could almost hear her voice, carried on the salt wind. "Don't let them erase you." "I didn't," I whispered. "I didn't, Grandma. I'm still here." 6 months later. The beach house had been transformed. I had spent the spring overseeing renovations, not to change it, but to restore it. The cedar shingles repaired, the rocking chairs refinished, the kitchen updated but keeping the vintage charm my grandmother had loved. And then I had turned it into something new. The plaque by the front door read, "The Elise Prescott Writers Retreat, for women who refuse to be erased." It was a small operation. Just 3 bedrooms, a shared kitchen, a quiet space for women from foster care and difficult backgrounds to come and write their stories. Some stayed for a week, some stayed for a month. All of them left with something they hadn't had before, the knowledge that their voices mattered. The first resident had moved in 2 months ago. Her name was Maria, 18 years old, aged out of the foster system with nothing but a notebook full of poetry and a fierce determination to be heard. She reminded me of myself at that age, hungry, angry, refusing to disappear. I watched her from the porch one evening, scribbling in her notebook with intense concentration, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope I had carried for years, the hope that my family would finally see me, accept me, love me. That hope was gone, buried with the trial and the verdict and everything that came after. This was different. This was hope built on solid ground. Hope earned, not wished for. Daniel visited on weekends when he could. We weren't officially together. Labels felt premature, and we were both still figuring out who we were after everything that had happened. But there was something there, something worth exploring. "You look happy," he said one Sunday morning, finding me on the porch with coffee and a book. "I think I am," I replied. For the first time in a long time. He sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. "What are you reading?" I showed him the cover. My grandmother's journal, one of several I had found in the house after reclaiming it. Her thoughts, her memories, her hopes for the future. "She wrote about you," I said. "About how you remind her of herself when she was young. Stubborn, observant, underestimated. Smart woman." "The smartest." I closed the journal and looked out at the ocean. She knew what they would try to do. She planned for it. She left breadcrumbs so I could find my way back. And you did. And I did. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves roll in and out, the eternal rhythm of the sea indifferent to human drama. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address, handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, a single piece of paper with 10 words. "You were right. I'm sorry it took this to see it." No signature, but I knew who it was from. Vivian. I didn't write back. There was nothing to say, not yet, maybe not ever. But I tucked the letter into my grandmother's journal, alongside the other artifacts of my family's complicated history. Forgiveness, I had learned, wasn't about pretending none of it hurt. It wasn't even about setting other people free. It was about releasing yourself from the endless, exhausting hope that they would finally understand. Some wounds don't get stitched by words. Some just stop bleeding when you stop picking at them. The dedication ceremony for the retreat was held on a clear spring afternoon. A small crowd gathered on the lawn. Daniel, Philip, Rachel, Robert Holloway, and his mother Catherine, on one of her good days. A few donors who believed in the mission, the 3 current residents. No press, no fanfare, just people who cared. I stood at the podium I had set up near the porch and looked out at their faces. My grandmother believed in the power of stories. I began. She believed that everyone deserves to be heard, that everyone's truth matters. I paused, steadying my voice. For a long time, I didn't believe that about myself. I let other people define my worth, my place, my story. I let them erase me. I looked at the plaque on the door, at the words I had chosen, for women who refuse to be erased. This place exists because she refused to let them win, because she left me a way back, and because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something that outlasts the people who tried to destroy you. I stepped down from the podium. Maria was the first to approach, her notebook clutched against her chest like armor. "Thank you," she said, "for making a place where we can exist." I hugged her, this fierce young woman who reminded me so much of myself, and felt something settle into place, not an ending, a beginning. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the residents had retreated to their rooms, I walked down to the water's edge. The sun was setting over the bay, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The waves lapped gently at the rocks, the same waves that had been here when my grandmother was alive, the same waves that would be here long after I was gone. I pulled out the small lockbox I had kept for years, the one containing my grandmother's letter, the gold family pin I had once coveted, Vivian's note of apology. The artifacts of a life defined by family and then redefined by its absence. I didn't need them anymore, but I kept them anyway, not as reminders of what I had lost, but as evidence of what I had survived. The wind picked up, carrying the salt smell of the sea, the promise of storms and clear skies and everything in between. I had spent so long wanting a seat at their table. wanting to belong to something I was never meant to be part of. Now I had my own table, my own legacy, my own truth. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.